truly pleased to introduce Dr. Alexander Moore, a professor of environmental health at UMass Boston, and a dear friend of mine from graduate school. We actually shared an office one year in like 2006 or 7, and that was a lot of fun. He's a specialist in climate and health, and his work has been published in numerous academic journals as well as in the media. He's also won a number of teaching awards in his many years of teaching experience. And he's an avid scuba diver and nature photographer and all-round explorer. Please join me in welcoming Alex for a talk on climate change problems and hopefully some solutions in the mix as well. It has already made it into the Brattleboro Commons and onto one of the Brattleboro Facebook pages, so we welcome further discussion. Thank you, Alex.
Unfortunately, I have the bad habit of walking around, so I hopefully will project enough that you will hear me, and if you don't, I'll start picking this up. I'm sure I'm going to trip if I keep it in my hands. By the way, somebody stole my clicker, so I'm going to use my phone to click, and I apologize, I'm not checking my texts or anything. I have to credit Claire with the title, which, as an excellent journalist, she came up with. It's the first time I actually give this talk. I've given versions of this elsewhere, but as chair of and director of a Climate Week program, it's become kind of a frustrating topic for me because so many of the solutions that are often discussed as solutions to climate change don't pan out in the science. And so as scientists, we look at them and we think, that doesn't work. So why do I care? Because I think occasionally these solutions are distracting our efforts toward, that could go, toward actual solutions. So the talk is structured with 10 things that I think are not really working, and 7 that in fact would and are. So the first, before we go into it, I just want to make sure everybody knows about the basics of what we're talking about, climate change, and how we are changing the planet by producing all these greenhouse gases. One is missing. Anybody know what's missing?
Ozone?
Water. Water vapor is actually a greenhouse gas. Yes. And so the more we produce greenhouse gases, the more we create this blanket. I know that the light is in front of the screen, but there's a blanket here. And the blanket of gases functions to trap the sun's heat into the Earth's climate system. CO2 is the one that everybody knows about, but actually methane is 86 times worse than CO2 in the first 20 years it's emitted. And methane is what you all use in your stoves if you have stoves, or in your heat if you have gas heat. So the more methane infrastructure there is, the more likely it is that there are leaks. And of course, methane is also the top of almost every oil reserve in the world. So anytime you have an oil rig and you see a flaring right at the top where they light up the gas, that's methane. When you don't see the flaring, it's even worse because the methane is just going out and heating up the planet. So in fact, one of the main things that we can do to stop global heating, as we call it now, I guess, is to stop methane leaks, and I can tell you more about that. The other gases, I can tell you also. We've got to kind of blow through all of this stuff, but please feel free to interrupt, ask questions anytime. So we're going to start with carbon offsets and carbon credits. How many people have heard about carbon offsets and carbon credits? All right. And how many people have purchased them while flying? Okay. I'm sorry about this. So the way it works for everybody, carbon offset or carbon credit, an emitter, somebody that owns a factory or that essentially does any industrial or commercial activity that produces carbon, which is basically everyone, can buy a carbon, can basically pay money to conservation organizations or even governments to protect land that would otherwise be threatened or deforested. Or, you know, they could pay into planting more trees. Or they could essentially pay into any scheme that would increase the carbon capture of the planet. So, you know, how nature can capture CO2 from the atmosphere. And then the same conservation organization that does this, or someone else, will issue a carbon credit, right? So I'm polluting, but I am also paying for that pollution with a, you know, to be basically recaptured. Unfortunately, this part of the scheme has no oversight whatsoever. There used to be a United Nations oversight. There's no longer. They pulled out. So it's now in the hands of private individuals, private companies. And those private companies have not been, they have not been particularly effective. In fact, if you want to read, now this is pretty recent, just a few months ago, you want to read a really deep dive into how private companies have been issuing carbon credits like hotcakes, and in fact, having no actual project that is doing anything to, you know, on the other side. You can read this article on the New Yorker, or you can read this article in The Guardian, and you can read this article in The Guardian too, and there are hundreds more. Essentially, what's happening is there's free money from people like you and me who want to feel better about flying, right? You want to feel better when you go across the country and you're producing a ton, multiple tons of CO2 traveling. So there comes the carbon credit or the carbon offset for you that says, here, you can pay $10, and those $10 go toward planting trees or protecting trees. Turns out most of those trees don't exist. Or if they do exist, they were never threatened. Or if they you know, it's just made up. And it's because, you know, there are speculators who are essentially seeing availability of free money from people that are conscientious, like you and me, that care about the climate, that care about nature, and want to see the world, you know, they want to feel better about themselves. So it's become a major advertising free-for-all, if you will. And in fact, you see this all the time whenever there's a conference. If you're going to a conference, right, we're offsetting our carbon footprint for COP or for Climate Week. And you know, it's tapping into our most natural instinct and the reason why advertising works. If you ever watched Mad Men, there was like this 5-minute monologue from the main guy, John Hamm. I would have had the clip, but because of copyright, we can't do it. And he says, you know, advertising is about one thing. It's about whatever you're doing, it's okay. And that's what the carbon offset is doing. So by all means, go through those articles and you'll see what I actually mean. So at the moment, this system is not working. Can it work? Yes. It can work with proper oversight. Who the overseer would be, though, is unclear, because the United Nations is not going to do it, and you need an international organization to do it. And yeah, ideally a government.
I don't know if you want to take the questions, but like, so when I hear you saying is that most of them are bogus, but I mean, there's got to be someone out there that's actually doing.
There are certainly people that are doing good work, particularly conservation organizations. Although there are also conservation organizations, I'm not going to name which, but it is the largest one in the world, that have gotten caught in really terrible schemes. So how do you figure out what is good and what is bad, you know? And it always falls on the individual to have the responsibility to do their research, when it should be, in fact, the responsibility of government and corporations. Yeah.
Is that why the UN pulled out?
They don't have the resources. Also, I'm being filmed. I can't tell you what I think of the UN. But in general, it just doesn't. they can't enforce. I mean, the UN can really only enforce laws in international waters and international, so how are you going to really do it? So there's way more where that came from. Just, I'm not making it up. And if you want a 20-minute funny summary of this, you can go and watch John Oliver's. This carbon offset talk, 23 minutes that he did on his show, stopped multiple massive tours of musicians around the world that were using carbon offsets to offset their footprint. So I knew actually several artists when I was organizing Climate Week that had to stop their tours because they were buying all these offsets and now they couldn't move anymore. Yeah. Geoengineering. This is another one. Geoengineering, here's a graphic from Britannica actually, of all the various technological solutions that we have been trying to, not we, but they have been trying to come up with in order to essentially offset, again, the imbalance in carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. My favorite is the sulfur aerosols that are supposedly should be distributed by airplanes. So we have airplanes all around the world. Why don't we attach sulfuric acid or other chemical gases, other gases to all planes, and essentially spray in the atmosphere these gases because they reflect sunlight. Just like when you have a volcanic eruption, right? When you have a volcanic eruption, the sun hits those gases, and it doesn't penetrate into the atmosphere and hit us. So when you have a volcanic eruption, temperature goes down around the world. At least within a certain range of the volcanic eruption, depending on where the eruption is. So a lot of engineers, some from Harvard, are arguing, why don't we do that artificially, constantly, so that we lower overall temperature globally with sulfuric acid and other similar chemicals that can reflect sunlight. And most of us have said, no, we don't want to do that. Most of us climate scientists, we don't want to do that because it's artificial. There are all sorts of repercussions, and they say, well, we've never done it. How do you know if it doesn't work? And this is the objection they offer every time. We haven't done it. How do you know it doesn't work? Yes, we have done it. Volcanoes, and you know what happens? Acid rain. So the sulfuric acid and other chemicals don't stay in the atmosphere. Eventually, they rain down. Right? And when they rain down, they'll rain down on crops and kill the crops. Or they'll rain down on the ocean and acidify the ocean even more than it is being acidified by just having CO2 seep into it, which is happening and killing coral reefs. So here's another graphic of the same thing. One of the least scary solutions is cloud seeding, or actually cloud brightening. So essentially creating more water vapor that makes clouds brighter and therefore blocks the sun. So because when you walk under a cloud, you feel the sun. Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you define what is albedo? I don't even know.
Albedo is the whiteness of the planet. It comes from the Latin albus, which means white, and there we go. We've had our Latin for the night. So what is happening is that when the world warms, the white parts of the world are being reduced. All the glaciers, all the snow, and as that white part is reduced, we reflect less light into space. So that heat is absorbed. So it's a vicious cycle, right? The glaciers are melting because of climate change, therefore this cloud brightening would in fact counteract that. But as I said before, in fact, water vapor is a greenhouse gas as well. There are a bunch of others. I'm not going to go through all of them. But overall, the problem is that nature is a perfect system, right? We have to think about it as a perfect system. We all evolved in it. It was balanced. And we are disrupting that system with our activity. That's what's happened. That's basically what climate change is. It's instability caused by our activity. And geoengineering says, let's disrupt it even more, instead of actually bringing it back to balance. Right? So this is the two camps. These are the two camps. There are climate scientists, ecologists who want to bring it back to equilibrium, to a balance, and there are other people who are no, that's ridiculous. We just have to continue consuming and just enable ourselves to consume more by just engineering the entire planet into our economy. It's essentially what they're arguing. The reason why they don't understand, this is why it's scary. The reason why they don't understand what's going on is that they think linearly, right? Cause and effect. I warm up, I brighten the clouds, or I reflect more sunlight with sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, and the temperature will go down. Yes, but how many other things are going to happen that you don't know? That's the problem. They don't think that way, right? They have linear thinking. Whereas reality tends to be multi-causal. And each of those causes, in order to understand it, you have to be an expert of a different discipline. And most people aren't. Most people can't think that way. I know maybe 5 or 6 people that just think always this way. Claire as well. But most other people think linearly, cause and effect. So these solutions that are being provided, particularly the geoengineering ones, tend to be these very linear, kind of myopic, kind of very partial solutions that just are not. We don't know what the others, what the domino effect is going to be by adopting them. And this is what I study, by the way, in my lab with my colleagues. We actually do. We actually do, in fact, what is called systems dynamics, the analysis of the whole system and all the causes. EVs. This got some heat on Facebook apparently because of my interview that was published in the comments. Just to clarify, I'm not saying that all EVs are bad. You should not feel bad if you drive an EV. I'm just pointing out it's not going to solve crisis. Okay. Why? Because EVs are charged with electricity. So depending on where you drive your electric vehicle, you're getting your power from a different source, right? Here on the graph, you'll see the dominant type of power in each state and province in North America. So the only state that really has the majority of in Northeast is Vermont. Yay! Yay! So if you drive an EV in Vermont, you should feel good about yourself. Right? So like John Hamm says, whatever you're doing, it's okay. But everywhere else, even in Massachusetts, where I live, it's gas. So I'm just moving the problem from my car to the power plant. That's the issue, right? And this is a little bit hard to read, but a much more accurate map of what we were talking about. Look at Vermont. These are all renewables. Incredible. You guys are doing great. Which is why this talk is so perfect for this state. I can't give this talk anywhere else. I'm going to get tomatoes thrown at me if I go anywhere else. But in Vermont, it's great. Because it's like, yeah, you can drive your EV and feel good about it. So an electric vehicle, in order to be produced, because of the battery, requires a lot more carbon, right? A lot more just carbon output in order for the materials, particularly the battery. But you can drive down literally drive down that carbon footprint by driving your car for a certain number of miles, which depends on where you live. So in Vermont, it's a lot fewer miles that you got to drive that car in order to offset the carbon footprint of the vehicle. Normal cars require less carbon, but they continue to burn for their entire life because they're burning gasoline. So, does that make sense? Yeah, over there.
Are you talking about all electric vehicles or hybrids?
Just electric vehicles. Hybrids have regenerative braking, so they don't. The battery. It's a little. It depends on how you do the math, but generally, I was really referring to pure electric vehicles. Hybrids. It's a mixed bag. Yeah.
So, this comes up a lot,
Yeah.
right? I mean, my conservative relatives are like all over this.
Yeah.
They're saying like, why are you getting an electric car? Anyway, my point being, there's a lot of info out there, and what you're saying is maybe it's not that accurate, that burning gasoline produces X amount of CO2.
Yeah.
Plugging your car in that requires electricity is going to produce the electricity that is used to renew your battery is going to be less CO2 than you buying gasoline and going X amount of miles. If you go
That really depends on where you charge it, because each state has a different source for their power. So that's why I'm saying Vermont is great, because it's either electric and
No, I get the
renewable.
renewable piece.
Yeah.
But you're saying is that there's really no, let's say, pick the worst state, whatever it may be.
Mississippi.
Okay. So in Mississippi, it doesn't make a hill of beans difference, is what you're saying.
In fact, one could argue it's worse, because to produce the car, you have to produce more CO2.
I do get that, the production of the car itself.
Yes, and by the way, if I just get to the next, and this is Vermont, hello, congratulations on your, look at what you did. I mean, this is incredible.
Wait, go back.
Well,
Thank you. A little longer.
it's just how much energy comes from different sources. Yep.
Could I just say that maybe you'll cover SEVs later in the 7 good things that solar electric vehicles can do a
We're
lot.
not there yet.
Yeah, well,
Not at
Aptera
scale.
might be.
Pardon?
Aptera might be coming.
I mean,
1,000 miles of charge.
for sure. I mean, as soon as that happens, I'm discussing the state of technology and market at the moment. And so this is the scheme, right? If you're charging your car from coal, gas, and oil, it's not helping. But aside from this, the major problem, is the lithium battery. And you can go to the government website, CPA, et cetera, and they'll show you the percentage of power that comes to your outlets and where it comes from. There's towns like mine, where I live, that have a lot of wind power. So in my case, specifically for my town in Massachusetts, it's okay. What you're doing is okay. But in other places, not so much. The other problem with electric vehicles is that lithium is a finite resource, right? It's limited. It doesn't go forever. What is sustainability? Well, you know what defines sustainable?
Keep doing it.
You can keep doing it
Forever.
forever. Thank you. That's the definition, right? So if you can't do it forever because lithium is limited, then it's not sustainable. So what are we doing?
Gasoline's not sustainable.
That's not sustainable either. I'm not arguing that it is. I'm not arguing that it is. Public transportation is much better than using gasoline. But the problem is that now we are using lithium at a scale that we never saw before. And it can only be sourced from a few places in the world. And they tend to be places that are meaningful to indigenous people particularly, and also to the ecosystem, to nature. Lithium mining is by no means a beneficial type of process. Thacker Pass, Nevada has had a protest there for years now against a new lithium mine. In northern Argentina and Chile, same thing is happening, and the Coya people are protesting against it. Nobody hears about it because it's indigenous voices and nobody apparently cares to hear them. And of course, there you go. This is Sierra Club. I mean, it's not just. And then, of course, because it's not enough to take it from land, we have now invented this idea of going into the deep sea at about 5,000 meters. That's about 1,500 feet depth, and essentially run these machines that will dredge the ocean for lithium, nickel, and other rare minerals that we need to produce batteries. We don't know, I mean, we know that of what effects this will have on the ecosystems that are in the deep sea, that are still some of the most pristine on the planet. But there are also, and I'm working on an article on this, there are also major effects that this could trigger by enriching the water with rare metals that are currently limiting what a chemosynthesis reaction that bacteria throughout the oceans are producing. It's complicated, but basically there are bacteria that produce methane at the bottom of the ocean, and the only thing stopping them is the concentration of nickel. And if you increase the concentration of nickel by grinding it, you may create more methane. That methane bubbles up from the ocean and can create a carbon bomb into the atmosphere. Not to mention the fact that doing this type of work at 1,500 feet depth is and just a feat that's almost impossible. And I encourage you to find a talk on this by Victor Vescovo, who's the only person in the world who's gone to the 7 deepest places in the world. Former commander in the Navy, very successful finance guy who has the expertise to do this, right? It's the only guy who actually created the system to go deep, and he will tell you this is financially not feasible, not to mention from an engineering point of view. I can tell you the science, it's not a good idea. But our solution to our transportation addiction is actually driving a lot of investment into this solution. So, not a great, yeah. This is what I'm describing here is regrettable substitution. It's a concept in public health. Half of my life is in public health, right? Impact of climate change on people's health and the economy. That's what I work on. And what regrettable substitution is, essentially replacing something that's bad with something else that's also bad. So we're replacing our addiction to oil, which is terrible and has caused the warming of the planet, with an addiction to lithium, which is also terrible in different ways. And we have not yet found, and other rare minerals, and we have not yet found, in fact, a battery or another solution that may work better than that. It just, in public health or in medicine, for example, you take away a drug that you see that is causing terrible effects for a patient, and then you give them another drug that eventually 20 years later you find out is producing terrible effects for the patient. That's regrettable substitution. We kind of just keep doing that because we're trying to find solutions, and sometimes we don't know that the thing that we're substituting is just as bad. This is a good example for pollution of our use of lead that we used in gasoline, but we also used in paint, as you all know. And on the left, this is the only graph, I promise. I don't use a lot of graphs. I know that people don't like graphs. But on the left, you see our production, the West's production of lead that stopped. after it was taken out of gasoline and we started having a leaded fuel. And on the right, you see the green is lead production in Asia. So people say, oh, we don't produce lead anymore. You know, lead is not, you know, it's toxic. We don't produce it. No, we do. It's just not here. We're just moving it. We moved everything that's toxic in somebody else's yard. We do that with lithium. We do that with all sorts of regrettable substitution that we continue. So we just take it out of our view.
What is that lead being used in?
Batteries,
Oh, lead batteries, okay.
lead acid batteries. All your cars have it.
We still not burning.
Yeah, they're smelting it in Asia though. This is the air pollution.
Air pollution, there you go.
So I got, that's my data, the red, and the green is from also the Climate Change Institute, but it's by somebody else. And I put them together on this graph to show you, you know, the legislation for lead started here. Yeah.
So, could you interpret why there are those spikes every once in a while? What?
Higher demand. Higher demand.
So
In lead.
the demand goes up and then it goes down for a couple of years and then it goes way up?
Yep, that's the economy. That's, you know, it's when somebody asks JP Morgan what the secret of the markets of the economy is, it fluctuates. Yeah.
Are you saying that lead is used in lithium-ion batteries?
No, not lithium. Lead acid batteries, normal car batteries, which are actually then sent back to Asia to be recycled. And if you've ever been to particularly poor neighborhoods in India, you'll find people taking these things apart and pouring the acid into their yards, and then with their bare hands taking the lead out of the battery in order for it to be recycled. And there is absolutely pervasive lead poisoning throughout those communities. And it's our batteries that we use.
Carl, a question quick. Is
Yeah.
lead, are lead acid batteries on the increase?
We're always producing more cars, so yeah. I don't have that answer, but my guess would be yes. Carbon recapture, this is another one. I have to admit, when carbon recapture came out, carbon recapture basically means taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So, you know, the atmosphere has more carbon. Can we not suck it out? It's just this very simple, very attractive answer, right? And unfortunately, and it's basically works like a massive, these things work like a massive rebreather. If you're a diver, a rebreather is a thing that doesn't blow bubbles. So you breathe the same air and the CO2 is absorbed by soda. So these are massive rebreathers. And they just absorb the carbon and then store it. And you can use it for building, for all sorts of things. Great idea. Unfortunately, at scale it does not work, and it's extremely energy intensive. And so it can only really be done in places that have renewables, which are 100% renewable. Where? Maybe Vermont, maybe Iceland, Costa Rica. But then there is the argument, well, that power that's being used for this could be used for other things, right? So how do you balance that out? You have to have dedicated power plants for this thing, and so far it has not been scaled. Yeah.
Could you just go back to the other slide before this one? Yeah, I just wanted to look at it.
Oh yeah, I was going to go back to it.
All right.
So BECCS are bioenergy with carbon recapture and storage. So you basically take biomass, that's essentially any plant or material that's produced by life, and you burn it. And then when you burn it, the CO2 that's produced out of it is captured and stored somewhere, and you get power out of the burning, right? So this is, I don't know why this is still a solution, kind of like clean coal. What? That's being billed as a solution to climate change. It's not. Why would you ever burn a forest? I mean, this is the thing, right? It's why would you ever take trees out of a forest? It just makes no sense. But it is something that's continues to be billed as a solution because, well, biomass. What? It's trees. Conferences. I'm actually director of a program at Climate Week in New York City, and I say this fully knowing that I'm part of the problem in that sense. But just as a figure, 70,000 people attended the last COP28 in Dubai. They all took airplanes to get there. 70,000 people. Do we really need every one of them there? Also, I thought COVID taught us that we had Zoom and we could do things with not flying, but no. And what was the effect? The COP president said there was no science behind the need to phase out oil. I mean, 70,000 people went to hear that. I thought we could use that carbon for something else. Or not at all. So, yay, solutions. I learned that, as I learned in class, I learned in my courses that I have to have the solutions, otherwise my students just tune out. So, I think one thing that we really lose sight of is the fact that we have 8 billion people on this planet. Hello? Yes. And when, they all demand energy, whether it's food or it's actually electricity or whatever. And so far, that's been fossil fuels, right? And it's unsustainable. Like someone said here, gasoline is unsustainable. The problem is that the power of 8 billion people putting all together their button, or even 4 billion, or even 1 billion, all together putting their finger on the same button is always unsustainable. That's the problem, right? You gotta think in terms of a system, not in terms of the individual. If everybody tries to do the same thing, it'll become inherently unsustainable by the very fact that it's 8 billion people. So what is more sustainable? Spreading the pressure of 8 billion people over multiple solutions, not just one. And more importantly, reducing the demand overall. In the first place, yes, absolutely. But nobody wants to talk about reducing demand. Why? Yeah.
No, I'm just agreeing with
Yeah,
you.
but why don't we talk about reducing demand? Yeah.
It's gonna cramp our style.
Yeah, it's gonna cramp our style. More importantly, it's gonna cramp those CEO pays, right? Those shareholder dividends, and there is this obsession with growth, right? And if you study, like some of us, like Claire and I, we kind of go a little farther back than the last 50 or 100 years in our perspective. We kind of dedicated 10 years of our lives looking at millennia of history, and if you look at it, there is no sign that growth was the end-all be-all of civilization for the last 2,000 years. It's an invention. It's an invention that's fairly recent, maybe 150 years, maybe since the Industrial Revolution started. And there are certain things that are dependent on that particular view. But I can tell you also that as we have adopted that view, that infinite growth is the good thing that we need to pursue, because otherwise we're not successful, the overall happiness of populations has gone down. So you're going to have infinite growth going up and happiness going down, because everybody is always on and constantly producing. So it's an addiction that we have not yet dropped. And if we start thinking, oh, you know what, I don't need to buy new clothes every year. I don't need to buy a new car every year. I don't need to eat meat every day. First of all, we know for a fact that certain decisions like this, particularly having to do with diet, are better for you, but they're also turn out to be better for the environment. So that's an important one. Another one that also, for example, would reduce energy demand, this is another example of reducing demand, is applying basic structural changes to how we live. Our buildings are all air conditioned. We still build our houses as we did 125 years ago. There's almost no, in most of the United States, I'm not saying those places that have very, very sustainable building materials, but like the average house is still built basically the same way that it was built 120 years ago. And so, you know, we have asphalt shingles, we have dark roofs. Why? And then we air condition the hell out of our houses. Why can't we, like, you know, dark absorbs heat. Most of our houses are not ventilated in the top, in the attic, so it's just a giant heat exchanger. Applying, for example, new sustainable solutions like heat abatement technology to roofs, which is not just painting them white, but it's also painting them in such a way that it reflects more light. You can achieve even 30% less heat absorption. That means 30% less energy that you're using for your air conditioner, which may not matter to you in Vermont, but in Texas, I assure you it makes a difference. In the Philippines, I assure it makes a difference. Especially if you don't have the grid to support that energy demand. How many times has Texas almost gotten to the point of failing to produce the energy necessary to, so yeah, this is another solution, and similar ones. Why is it important? Because by 2040, according to the IEA, because of global warming, those areas of the world are going to increase energy demand by that much. This is India with more population than China, right? 1 billion here, 1 billion there, 600 million here, another billion in Africa. Most of those places, this are the most populated places in the world. And they're gonna suffer the results of our overconsumption, right, a lot sooner than us because of where they live. They already are. Sorry. This is a map, and it's dated, of how much of each of these countries is actually air conditioned. India is 7%. If India reached the level of air conditioning that we have in this country, can you imagine what that does to the planet in terms of energy demand and carbon that we put into the... So we really have to shift this, right? This is the biggest problem in climate adaptation that we have. Nobody talks about it, but it is. I mean, how are these people going to survive? It's getting hot out there. Not only in places that are far from us, but also in the United States. This is in business as usual. You know, we do nothing about our energy sources, which is basically what we're doing right now, right? We're not really increasing at the speed that we should our renewables. And this is what the map is going to look like in terms of days above 90 degrees. So if it's 98 degrees outside, you cannot be outside for more than 15 minutes without getting a heat stroke. Because your body can literally not cool itself above the temperature that is its normal temperature. Right? And then when humidity increases, that's even worse. So imagine living in places where it's going to be, you know, half of the year, 6 months out of the year is going to be above 90. So we're going to see climate migration not only from places in the global south, but also from the American south into the north. People ask me, you know, well, okay, given all of this bad news, what should we do about where should I buy a house? I always answer New England because it's, you know, so far we've kind of escaped this. This was last summer, by the way. This is a heat index map, which is humidity plus heat. And, you know, when it's 107 outside, or 111 here in Phoenix, it's not livable. This is really important, but very hard to talk about because people don't understand what it really means. valuing and defending nature beyond its economic value. So let's create an example. Somebody wants to set up a gas power plant in Brattleboro. What's the first step? They're going to have permits and an environmental impact statement is going to be created by the state, by the city, probably also by the federal government. And that environmental impact statement gives you scenarios of the impact of this gas power plant on your town and on nature. And it'll give you a scenario A where they say, yes, you can do it exactly as you propose. Scenario B, yes, you can do it exactly as you propose, but with some changes. And C, don't do it at all. And the assessment of whether one should do it or not is entirely dependent on economic value. So how much is the new gas power plant going to affect the economic value of nature outside there, your waterfalls and your trees and your water quality, or the health of people? The value of a life is actually quantified in those, a human life is actually quantified in those documents, because we cannot think in any other way except in terms of economics, in terms of money. And that is the problem. John Muir used to say, nothing dollarable is safe, however guarded. So the very step of putting the value of a tree, the value of an ecosystem in terms of dollars is the problem, because we continue to perpetuate the problem, right? If somebody can give to this tree a certain value, there's going to be somebody out there willing to pay that value or more. It's that simple. So you have to defend the value of the ecosystem beyond its economic value. Would you ever put value on a human life naturally, like forced? Would you do it? Doesn't it sound abhorrent to you? So why would you do it in nature? It's the same thing. If the natural ecosystem decays, the value of that life, the health of that life also decays. So why are you doing it? This is so crucial and yet so difficult to grasp. And how do you do it? Well, you pass laws to do this. It's called rights and nature laws. And they have been passed in several countries, including Ecuador and Panama.
Excuse me, what
Yeah.
was the name of that?
Rights of nature.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, we know the value of nature intrinsically, even though if we cannot grasp this, it's hard to communicate, right? I'm seeing your eyes glaze over a little bit right now, but we know this, and viscerally we know it in our heart, because during the pandemic, when Google was tracking you, this is Google tracking you, where you're going, right? And when Google was tracking you, and everybody stopped going to buy food, stopped shopping, stopped going to workplaces, but where did they go? Solution number 4 is to vote and vote your dollars. People, especially my students, keep saying it doesn't matter if I vote. I can't tell you how absolutely important it is to convince young people to vote. And voting, yeah, it happens every 2 years, every 4 years. No, it happens every time you open your wallet. Every time you open your wallet, you're deciding whether to buy a sustainable product or not. Whether it's eating chicken sandwich versus a beef sandwich. Whether it's buying, into products that pollute versus products that don't pollute. Local versus global. You're doing that. And by the way, your vote does matter. This is just the coverage of new regulations against pollution and climate, for climate, from the last week and a half. Nobody pays attention to this, but it's happening. Why is it happening now? Because we're in election year and they want this to all hit the ground right before the election so that they get reelected and they continue to do the same thing. But this has just happened. This is all executive. The EPA is an agency of the executive president. Solution at 5 is a healthier, low-carbon diet. There's a nice documentary on the Mediterranean diet called Blue Spots, something like that, on Netflix. Watch it by all means, but basically that's what it means. If you look at the average emissions per food here, I'm sure you all know that meat, particularly beef, is the highest carbon food you can eat, and it goes down from there. So I'm not saying you don't have to eat meat ever. I'm not saying all of you should turn into vegetarians on the spot or vegans on the spot. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I gotta put it in for, beef is you can raise beef on land that you can't raise anything else on without any inputs. So you really need to make the distinction between stuff that comes out of CAFOs and stuff that comes out of pasture.
Well, sure, but
Huge difference.
But cows still birth.
It's very unfair to local farmers to make people think that beef is horrible, when in fact, it can be the lowest carbon form of protein you can get. It's just a question of how it was raised, and that's a huge point, isn't it?
Such a tiny percentage is raised that way.
Yeah, well, it's a small percentage. So again, I go back to the scale system. If
you're talking about certainly on the national basis, yes, but you're talking about a particular type of stuff that's even raised by burning down the rainforest to import the stuff,
Yep.
or fattened in CAFOs in western United States.
Yep.
That's a totally
Also
different
south.
product, and is very unfair to small farmers, the way that's presented.
Okay, I take your point. I think you've represented it for everybody else too. In terms of water, also the water consumption of meat is represented. So a burger will take 400 gallons of water, a quarter pounder. So we have
Chickpeas?
chickpeas are actually pretty water intensive, believe it or not.
Lentils, and what's the other thing over there? Goats.
Yeah, goat meat, soy also,
Soybeans and chickpeas are very intensive.
water intensive. Yeah.
What about?
And if you don't care about the carbon or the water, these are the numbers of animals that we slaughter every year.
Can you go back?
Yep.
Looks like they go into your slide.
Yep, sure. I think somebody has my slides. So. I believe this is from the U.S. government, by the way, so I'm not making this up. The slide is from the U.S. government, not from me.
Can we watch the Zoom program later?
I'm sure that will be available, and I will get sued 3 different ways. I try to make this point in pretty much every talk. I know it kind of falls flat, but killing that number of animals every year sounds insane to me. Whatever, whether you care or not. This is also an unusual one that I think I've never heard anybody bring up, but just FYI, journalists are an extinct species almost. They're losing their jobs. If they keep their jobs, they're paid very little. And so I strongly suggest you support your local and national media outlets by reading them. Yep.
There's a venerable environmental program on NPR that's probably running over 20 years, Living on Earth.
Yeah.
Just heard a promo for it. It airs on NHPR, that's National.
New Hampshire National Radio.
At 7 a.m. on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I know.
And
But you can get it on a
It
podcast.
doesn't air at all on DPR, so that is a very
You can get it on a podcast.
indicator of even in New Hampshire, Vermont,
Yep.
how important environmental journalism.
It is. So one of the things
That sucks.
I know it is. This sucks a lot, actually. So much that I've actually written grants to essentially give fellowships to journalists to have money to teach scientists how to talk about climate, right? Most of us don't know how to do this. And I've been partnering with the Pulitzer Center and the Knight Foundation and blah, blah, blah. Because this is desperate. Like,
Yeah.
your journalists are going away. AI is writing most of the stuff that you get pushed on your Apple News every day that you read, or whatever it is that you read. Actually, Apple News still has human editors, but still, the people who are writing the articles themselves for CNN and whatever, AI. It's journalism. What they do is just they take a press release and they churn it into AI, and then it spits out something original to evade copyright. And there goes all the jobs for journalists who are starting out. So all the ones that are left are the freelancers that just always wanted to do investigative journalism, and they're really literally saving the planet, right? They're telling you things that nobody else can tell you. They're incredible people, extremely dedicated, passionate about, and they're getting paid nothing. So we need to figure this out. We need to figure out how to keep journalists in business, because we cannot have computers tell us what the information is. Yeah.
What about MSNBC?
What about it?
Do you feel like it's reliable and environmentally friendly?
I'm gonna get sued. It really depends, but it's a television show, so I don't think of that as particularly as journalism.
Never mind, sorry.
We should really read. Like you should. If you're a friend of mine, you're gonna get a text at 7 a.m. every morning when I'm reading my 3 newspapers with my dog at my feet eating breakfast. That's what I do. I encourage everyone to encourage everyone they know to do the same thing. You really got to read the news. Most people are getting their news from TikTok and Facebook. It's absolutely, yeah.
So I'd like everybody to know that there's an organization called Radically Rural. I'm pretty sure it's nationwide, but it's operating out of Keene, New Hampshire, and it brings journalists in who are doing investigative journalism in all kinds of fields.
I know.
Radically Rural is the name of the organization. They put on a conference. Sorry, you don't have to fly. And it's really totally worth your time and effort to look into that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Also, Solution Journalism Network does the same thing. I've partnered with them before. There are a bunch of these. They're not very well funded. So you gotta buy your subscription. It's nothing. But it does go toward these efforts. And the last one, which we did this morning, is reconnecting with nature. I know it sounds really hokey and it sounds really hippie. Like, oh yeah, well, you're gonna go and take your walk in the woods. Actually, we are so perhaps not you in Vermont, where you're surrounded by nature, but most people are so disconnected from where their food comes from, what the effects of industry, extraction, anything is on the ecosystem they live in and rely on for their clean air and clean water. And actually walking in the woods and seeing that, or trying to find a place to do that and being unable to do so, as most people who live in New York City, for example, is so crucial, because then you actually understand, wait a sec, I live in the Silent Spring, literally, the 1962 book by Rachel Carson. I can't find a place where birds are chirping. I can't find a place that actually doesn't smell like exhaust. I can't find a place that doesn't sound like a highway. And go find it. I mean, in a metropolitan area, it takes you an hour and a half in New York City to find a place that somewhat allows you 5 minutes of calm. But also, you kind of understand what's missing, and that crucial part of being connected with what's giving you life in terms of water, air, and food. And there's science behind it. Not only is it benefit, this is Nature, by the way, Nature, the journal, not that it matters, but it's a serious journal. Not only does it have health benefits, it's dose dependent. It's another public health, the public health guy coming out again. It's a public health term for it. Actually, the more you get, the better you are. right? It's not just that a walk of 15 minutes is going to give you the same benefit as a walk of an hour. A walk of an hour is going to give you way more benefits. And if you couple that with the other solution of better diet, you're actually going to live longer, which turns out to be the solution that everybody who talks about Mediterranean diets or special diets that give people longer lives and better lives in their older years. It's movement and better and less protein. So I guess the last thing I would say is this: the sustainability can't be just another word used to keep doing the wrong thing. And that's essentially the take-home message, right? So many of these solutions that are often billed as, saving the world or from climate change or making it better, making you feel better about flying somewhere are not actually solutions, but they're billed as our sustainable program. And each company has their chief sustainability officer. And they come up with those. And, you have to do some digging. Not everybody's a scientist, so I tried to give you that tonight, just a little partial view of what's behind some of those solutions. So, thank you. Q&A after, and we did it throughout, so I apologize that I went over time, but I kind of wanted to give you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd just like you to repeat from 1 through 7 your solutions, please. Just the names, just the names.
Solution 1, spread the pressure. Solution 2, reduce demand. Value and defend nature, rights in nature. Vote. Please vote. Low carbon diet. Journalism. And, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks so much. This was really excellent. So I happened to go to another talk earlier today, which was a lady talking about her book on mindful microdosing with mushrooms. And I was just thinking about, how the two topics kind of go together, especially in light of your last solution of reconnecting with nature. And, one of the points that she was making was, it's so important as a way to reconnect with nature, to take this substance that's actually, grows locally, it grows all around here, it grows all around, the world, like there's mushrooms everywhere. And I wonder if you could comment at all either about that or about other rituals that might bring people closer to nature.
This is where the New York Times will title,
Climate scientist loves drugs.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is...
Because if we don't have a microphone going on, the people on Zoom can't hear
Sure.
the audience.
Sure. The question is, there was talk here in Brattleboro, unsurprisingly, about microdosing. About microdosing and mushrooms and how the experience of taking those psychedelics may in fact allow, which are a natural molecule, right, that grows naturally, may in fact enhance the reconnection with nature, or at least that a lot of people argue that that's the case. It's actually, this is an indigenous practice, and I'm going to totally flip to that now. It's an indigenous practice that has a very long history, from peyote to ayahuasca to, I can keep going, there are many. I'm not an expert, but I personally, and this would be a very personal take on it, I don't do it because I'm a control freak. And I don't know where my mind is going to go. But given what I work on, it's going to go dark places, most likely. So I don't do it, but whatever makes people, I think, understand what is really kind of an ethereal feeling. There are these practices of forest bathing, both in Japan and in Scandinavian countries, and I forget their name in the different languages, but it's a practice, right? People go and just kind of disconnect and live in nature for a few days. And they get a health benefit from it, right? Why would you prohibit that? Why would you turn, there is no victim here. There is no, and I guess I'll end with a quote from Bill Hicks, who was a very underappreciated, crucial stand-up comedian from the 90s. It's amazing that we prohibit, he said, not me, he said, that we prohibit substances that grow naturally on the ground. And then, we give away things that can kill you very easily, like, drugs that have been proven to be very, very fentanyl. Anybody? I mean, things that are rather, even with a prescription, there are things that they're basically lethal. So there is quite a dichotomy there. Yeah.
Another subject, so I do get it, in terms of EVs, but the reality is that around here, we do have to drive, so two things.
I didn't say don't drive.
No, I understand, and we spoke, but my other question is, we need to amp up public transportation big time. Is there any place in the United States where somebody is really doing great advocacy around building public, especially in sort of rural, semi-rural areas such as this? Is it happening anywhere?
So the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the Climate Bill, has several billions of dollars for enhancing public transportation, including rural areas, but also the existing rail network. As you all know, our rail network, this country was built on the rail network, and we're still using the same rail network of the 1800s, basically. In Europe, New York to Boston, which takes 4 hours, would take 90 minutes. And that's insane to me, right? That I'm European, I grew up in Europe, and it's the one thing I miss about Europe. It's like, I want to go to New York, and I don't want to make a 3-day trip. It's like 90 minutes. People can commute. But it's not happening here. There's money for it. I don't know of any community that's doing that in rural areas well. Sorry. Yeah.
Could you include that as a solution number 8?
Sure. Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. There are way more solutions. I thought public transportation, it wasn't the article, so I didn't include it. But I should have. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, so for people who don't have a lot of time for reading, what would be 1 or 2 recommended sources to keeping up with news and developments?
I don't know if this is fair, but I think it's fair game to say The Guardian has the best environmental vertical of any newspaper in the world, without a doubt. They started it. I remember giving talks about climate in only about 6 or 7 years ago, and there was no other newspaper that had an environmental section in the world, like major newspaper, right? I mean, there was Inside Climate News, and there was Bloomberg Green or whatever, but CNN Climate didn't exist. It's thanks to my friend Bill Weir that it now exists. But The Guardian was, the environmental coverage they do is without parallel. And it's constant every day. It's a constant every day, extremely high quality. It was founded named by John Bedell. It just passed away, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
Are there any eminent scientific breakthroughs lurking out there? 2 of them I've heard, and one of them was a couple of years ago. I feel like I'm almost nuts that I heard it. There was something to do with generating electricity off of iron and rust, I heard, which obviously is very different than
iron
lithium.
batteries is what you heard.
There's that one, and then recently some people released something from UMass at Amherst about generating electricity off of air.
Off of what?
Air.
Air.
Is there anything that we should know about that would get us off this lithium?
Well, as a UMass person, a UMass Boston person, I have to take the opportunity to say the Amherst, I don't know about it. But the iron batteries are a solution that was actually created at MIT as well as another lab at the same time. They're currently not competing with lithium. In their current form, they only are big enough. They're only adaptable for citywide structures, right? So if you want to avoid brownouts, you want to avoid blackouts even, and just have kind of that battery backup, then you have iron batteries. It's not yet in place. I think there's a lot of what we called in systems dynamics is known as policy resistance, meaning there's inertia against it because now we're all set on lithium, we all want the lithium and the nickel batteries, and we don't want anything else. That's what we're prepped for. But iron batteries are actually, you can do it almost forever, right? Because it's the most common common metal on the planet. And you can recycle it, right? Very easily. It hasn't taken off yet. I've only asked men so far in the last 5 minutes or so. So yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, to add to your list of reliable sources is ProPublica.
Oh,
Are people aware of ProPublica?
Yeah.
It's a nonprofit that does a lot of environmental coverage and
Also the
investigative journalism.
Absolutely. And they've gotten a couple of prizes for it
Yes.
recently. Yes, ma'am.
So in your slide, and you commended Vermont for being the most renewable, but you had the nuclear power plants still on your slide.
That was
No, it was, but it
Because
only...
that finished in
2017.
2017.
I gotta go back.
You were past 30, yeah.
It ended.
Oh, I interpreted that as like all nuclear.
No. It ended, right, 2015 or whatever.
Oh, I
I'm
see.
sorry, I don't know the local history, I'm afraid, but it seems not to be. By the way, hydro is not all that great either. The dams are not fantastic. I'm only talking about it in terms of a climate impact, but I'm not advocating we should build dams everywhere, just to be clear. Yeah.
My question, of course, is
Yeah.
related to nuclear power, because at the COP conference recently, it was all about nuclear power, and Saudis want nuclear power. Now we're about to give it to them, and the National Academy of Sciences came out with a study last year saying very clearly that nuclear power is not a solution to climate change. The National Academy of Science, nevertheless, it's
We
being...
don't know where to put it. We don't know where to put the waste. It's the bottom
Yeah.
line. Right? So.
But regarding sort of, so that's your opinion about nuclear, you don't feel...
At the current state of technology, we don't know where to put the waste, and you're gonna have to put it in somebody's backyard, and I don't understand what that is, right? You gotta put it underground. This stuff doesn't stop being radioactive. In 20,000 years from now, it's gonna be worse. So there are actually committees of the government that are trying to find ways to tell people 20,000 years from now, don't dig here.
Yes.
And we don't know what language they're gonna speak, so they're creating, it's insane. I mean, it's so.
Nowhere in the world.
Right. So we also do it extremely inefficiently in the United States. In France and elsewhere, their nuclear power plants are much more efficient. I work with France all the time, with the embassy and various other actors, and they keep saying, why do you guys do nuclear power how it was done in the 50s? And that's the problem. Yes.
I think you were talking about quite individual things, and I think we need more systems thinking. We think we need to think, 15-minute neighborhoods, low traffic neighborhoods will bring people into closer proximity, which means we don't have to drive.
Yeah.
There needs to be reform of Act 250 in Vermont to encourage more villages rather than spreading across the mountainsides. There has to be sort of bigger thinking about how things interrelate much more. And I think that's something that's a little more complicated. How do you get people to sort of change behavior and think in a bigger way?
I just moderate a whole conference at MIT for yesterday. Was that Friday? No, so 2 days ago. Sorry, I've been doing a lot of stuff. And it was all about this. How do you do? So behavioral change is the hardest thing that nobody ever talks about. And that's why, to me, I think that's why I focus on journalism, because I think that people are still getting their news from somewhere and they're acting on that news, right? And we assume that the news, okay, I'm just gonna skip. We assume that the news comes from these sources, but in fact it doesn't. What you see, what my students, or even people in the public, where they get their news is not news sources. It's social media, it's TikTok, and they don't even know. They don't even realize this. I almost got mobbed by at a TED Talk conference when I said, ultimately it's about the news, and everybody in the room were like, they're all doing social media. And so how do we change that, right? I mean, in order for people to know that there are things such as a 15-minute neighborhood or a 15-minute, where everything is within 15 minutes. I live in one of those places. But how do you design that? And the fact that Google is actually redesigning cities with their digital twin of cities, and there is such a project that you can do that, and that towns can adapt to that. Nobody knows about it. Most of the news that I showed you today, nobody knows about it, right? So if you have to affect behavioral change, you have to affect it from somewhere. I think the news is the best place to do it. If you want to do it in other ways, please be my guest. This is what I know. Okay.
Bloomberg has an excellent site called Bloomberg Cities.
Yeah.
Bloomberg Green. Bloomberg also has Bloomberg Cities that talks all about 15-minute cities and all kinds of other things like that, extensively.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you.
The
Youth in the back.
Okay.
And then
There's a youth in the building.
There's a youth in the building.
I was
the youngest person here. Yes.
No, my little brother too, but I've been hearing this argument a lot that as globally, if we're looking globally, as gross domestic product rises, affluence rises with it, obviously, and therefore population growth declines, and so there's this kind of this argument that as for a lot of people who are free market proponents are arguing that we should just let the markets do its thing, and then naturally we'll be consuming less. And a lot of countries where, you were talking about how consumption is really going to be concentrated in high density population places. So a lot of people are saying if we just let them do their thing and develop, then eventually they'll be at a point where they don't need non-renewables. What's your response to that?
The eventually is what worries me. In order for the developed world to have reached almost a plateau in terms of population growth, it took us since the last epidemic that actually hit anybody, it's taken more than 100 years. We don't have 100 years. Said simple, we don't have 100 years. So it's not the number of people necessarily, it's the consumption per person that's going up. So the consumption per person, if you elevate the standards of living, if you basically give air conditioning or infinite consumerism to everybody, the level of consumption per person is going to go up a lot faster than population is going to go down. Right? It's going to take 100 years for those people, or a generation. Even 25 years is too much. So you got to allow that standard of living to go up without the consumption following, is the deal. So you got to find those solutions that allow developing countries that are suffering the most from our consumption to reach a level of welfare that is respectable without also threatening that welfare by their consumerism. It's hard. There was a... Ma'am.
You didn't mention ecotourism as one of the things that doesn't help.
Or flying.
Does it help or does?
I question whether it does.
Okay. So this is going to be my personal opinion. So the question is whether ecotourism helps or hurts. It really depends on where. I'm concerned about the travel obsession that everyone has embraced recently, where there are digital nomads, you know, people that basically work from their laptop anywhere in the world, and they're basically hopping around on planes constantly. Not to mention that they're gentrifying places such as Costa Rica or Panama, or you know, places where they're buying a condo, and you know, bringing local prices up where the people can't even reach, and then so we're actually exporting our gentrification because we like to have that kind of lifestyle. So I'm skeptical. However, I also know of countries like Costa Rica that have done an enormous amount of good with their economies. Costa Rica is 99% sustainable. Like it's all renewable energy. So do I want to reward that? Don't we want to reward that? Yes. I think we should, because that's all we got, right? The economy is the tourism economy. So it's a hard question to answer. I think it really depends on where and the frequency. Yes, sir.
You cited two countries as being like 99% sustainable, and that's Costa Rica and Iceland. Isn't that strictly because they've got volcanic activity there and they can tap into
Iceland also
geothermal?
does a lot of hydroelectric power.
Pardon?
They also do a lot of hydroelectric power. And yeah, they have geothermal. Costa Rica does all sorts of things. Does solar, it's mixed. But it was an intentional choice that the country made to do that, and it happened. This is the thing, about behavioral change, and all these choices. In the article, I was quoted by saying there is a country in the world that has the most population of any other, and yet their rate of increase in meat consumption is the lowest. It's India. Why? Because culturally they don't like to eat beef. And they export it. It's one of the top exporters. But personally, the people in the country, all 80% of them have a restriction on what they eat, on purpose, by choice. So when we say, well, we can't do this, I'm skeptical that we can't do this. Why? We change our fashions every day, every year we change fashion. Every season we change fashion. Why can't you change how you eat? I mean, people buy different clothes every year. That's a pretty serious change in your, so why can't you change how you eat? Yes, sir.
Three things real quick. One, I want to recommend a movie, Common Ground, that I just saw that's going around about regenerative agriculture and ways to use cows to help regenerate fields. And also, well, I guess carbon footprint, I heard the idea of the carbon footprint on individuals came from utilities. So to take the responsibility off of them.
Absolutely. But this gets to my point. You were asking, so the question is, the idea of a carbon footprint, that is how much carbon you produce by simply living, buying things and driving your car, etc. That idea comes from the oil industry. It comes from fossil fuels. Right? To shift the blame from them to the individual. That's true. However, I don't agree with the fact that we should just continue to do what we're doing and buying the same things that we're buying and consuming at the same level that we're consuming simply because we expect the government to do something, right? Or that we expect corporations to get better. They're not going to get better. The only thing that a corporation is going to listen to is you stopping to buy their products. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I think about a lot is countries, especially in the global south, that have fossil fuels that are just starting to be discovered and exploited. Particularly Uganda and Namibia are set to ramp up oil production shortly in the near future. And their point is like, well, you guys have been profiting off this for generations. It's our turn.
Yeah.
From a justice perspective, it's very hard to, you know, tease out the different factors there.
That's absolutely right. It's the whole reason why the United Nations has what are known as the Sustainable Development Goals. Right, so you have to allow these people to develop because it's right. It's the just thing to do. We were able to. Why didn't, you know? Are we going to be colonialists again and stop a country? Or, you know, are we going to be the certain banks that did it during? I was going to say who in the 70s. You know, going into countries. No, you're not going to do this. You're going to do it this way. No. Ideally, we give them a better choice, but. You know what that choice is. Can you use fossil fuels without producing carbon emissions and therefore allow them to? There are certain technologies that have been developed that can use certain fossil fuels and recapture most of the carbon. I don't know. I'm not that good a policymaker, I guess. I worked in the Senate for a while, but not that much. Yeah.
Since methane is so much worse than carbon, what are your suggestions for ways that we can encourage the reduction of methane?
Hey, the first thing we should do is stop leaks. Right? So that would be the number one thing. If you walk around, I do this all the time. I walk around, smell the gas called the National Grid. It'll take you 30 minutes. Because they have to read you a whole slew of liability things before you can actually tell them, hey, at this address there is a leak. Oh, get out of the house. It's not my house. I just want to, well, I have to tell you to get out of the house. No, it's not my house. Just please plug the leak. And you got to keep doing this, right? In Boston, we have some of the oldest infrastructure in the world. And forever, it was the leakiest. And an organization called Mothers Out Front brought together, which was founded by Kelsey Worth, by the way, brought together mothers from the Boston area, and they went through the city and labeled gas leaks anywhere they found. And Marty Walsh, the mayor at the time, said, you know, we had this problem forever. And all of a sudden, we have this army that comes out and fixes it. We got to do that. So fixing leaks would be the number one thing. We can't ask everybody to switch to solar. It's actually, you know, it's the same question, the same issue with developing countries. Not everybody's got the money. There are subsidies, yes, but it's still very expensive. So, you know, it's going to happen. It's going to happen slowly. More subsidies toward solar, where it basically costs nothing to switch. That would be great. We don't have enough yet. Scott. Oh, sorry. So sorry. Go ahead, sir. Sorry, Scott.
So actually, Tamara's on the Brattleboro Energy Committee. I'm the chair of the Brattleboro Energy Committee, and we've got another Energy Committee member. It's been very frustrating because we're on the Energy Committee. There's a ton of stuff that we want to do. Like we started an e-bike library that I run. There's this window dressers organization that does inserts. We did a thing about their buildings that use coal in Brattleboro. We worked with Efficiency Vermont, and we need help. There's like hundreds of people in Brattleboro who are like, really like, yes, we've got to do something about climate change. But we had 4 members for like a year and a half. We couldn't get members, and we're doing concrete, specific things that actually make a difference. Like I changed my whole lifestyle. I ride an e-bike, and the last 2.5 years I put 5,000 miles on it. That's like probably 4,700 miles that I didn't ride my car. So I really want, like, the e-bike library just opened. Does anybody know that there was an e-bike library and that now you can make reservations? Does anyone in this room know that?
The one at Brooks Library?
Yes, yeah, it just opened, and there's a big announcement about it, but nobody knows about it. So we have like a 5 or 6 days where you can ride an e-bike, not just for a day, but from Friday to Wednesday. and we want people to try them out. We want people to see them. We want to support the fight. So I don't want to go into specifics, but I'm just saying that there's all this energy in Brattleboro, and I'm sure in this room, and there are like really concrete things that the energy companies are trying to do, and there are other organizations that are trying to do. And I really want people to get involved in doing specific, local, concrete things that might make a small difference. But if it's, you know, when it's 8 people doing it, it isn't that much. But if it's 50 people,
it also changes the whole culture, right? If everybody's doing something, if that's part of your life, if you're reading the news about it, or if you're doing something as part of a committee, or if you're doing something by supporting it, or voting, or donating, whatever it is, it changes your culture, right? And that's what we really need for behavioral change. Again, if you want to remove the demand, you got to change the behavior. It's the hardest thing. I'm part of my committee in my town. I actually was part of building it. We haven't been able to do a lot, and I totally empathize with what you're saying. But I think it always goes down to communications.
Yeah, I have a question from the online audience. Given the fact that, you know, there are a lot of, I don't know, environmental Ponzi schemes, so, you know, the first thing that you spoke about. Do you have any advice for folks who are interested in moving their investment portfolios, whether it's their businesses or whether it's their pensions or whether it's their church or anything like that, who have investments to responsibly invest their funds?
Come to my talk in Rhode Island in July is my answer. I'm actually giving a talk at Opal, which is, I think, the largest wealth conference in America. There are many impact investing funds. I'm not going to name any of them because I am going to get sued if I say
I
that.
can answer that a little bit. There's a socially responsible investing firm that's been around for a long time in Brattleboro, Windham Smith. You can contact them. That doesn't mean you have to use them.
Yeah.
I use them, but they're really friendly there, and talk to Penny or Brent, and they'll at least point you in the right direction.
The state of the question currently is that most of the major funds, the major banks, the names that you would hear and recognize are kind of pulling back because of what I said, or what I started with, right? That some of these investments have not panned out, that have not been sound, and they want to reduce their risk, which as an investment firm, what else are you going to do? But there are actually investment funds, hedge funds, or that are almost uniquely dedicated to sustainable investing. And you can kind of see this in the Bloomberg Earthshot Prize, where he's giving money to that kind of company, those kind of companies that have that brilliant idea and making it an Earthshot, making it, you know, kind of this moonshot, you know, to scale it as fast as possible. And if, you know, if Bloomberg is putting money behind it, my friend Ted Janulis runs Investable Oceans. It's all ocean-based sustainable companies, and it's a fund, right? There are those out there. They're smaller, they're hard to find, you gotta do your research. The risk is not the, oh, I'm gonna get 5% return for sure. There's no such thing. So you're taking a risk because we're making it up as we go. Yeah.
Many of the funds, I believe, don't invest in the technologies. They invest in companies that are improving their own environmental footprints as well.
Yeah, those are not the good ones. The good ones are the ones that are investing in new companies.
Those are moonshots.
Yeah, the moonshots. And again, as I said, the risk is higher, but see who else is investing with them, and you know, that'll give you an idea. By the way, we're totally over time. Please cut me off whenever. I'll take questions whenever. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
You know, just reduce demand,
Yeah.
Crypto, AI, and our phones, and all of the thousands of photographs we'll never look at, in computing. I mean, who's talking about reducing demand?
Sorry, I just. pet peeve. Crypto is killing the planet in its current form. There are many. I didn't put it there as a solution because it's still small. But there are many people who are actually arguing that you should create virtual coins that correspond to nature. So, a piece of nature, you create an NFT or a coin, digital coin. The transaction to produce that coin is producing tons and tons of carbon because of the energy necessary to produce it in its current form, at the way that blockchain works, right? We could transition to a different kind of system someday. They want to go from a proof of work to a proof of stake. I'm not going to get into the weeds about it. But the bottom line is crypto, in its current form, in its volume, is not good for the planet. There's a big coal plant in Montana. Again, go look at The Guardian. Big coal plant in Montana that imagine you had a coal plant in Brattleboro that you worked 20 years to close. A crypto company bought it and runs it to run their servers. What? So, there are a few things that are more damaging for no reason, right? For speculation, basically. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, a few of the points that were raised today were really spoken to eloquently by Bill McKibben in Putney a couple weeks ago. On the issue of where we are now and the amount of energy that needs to be expended at this point, he said the political will has to crank up. He pointed out huge success on the divestment front to, I forget what number of $1 trillion he pointed to, and that was his emphasis like 3 years ago. But now the foot dragging on policy, journalism, he was really talking grassroots. You talk to 10 people, out of those 10 people, 8 of them talk to 10 people, and make it really clear that now we are out of time. We need policy, effective policies now. So journalism helps inform those folks who might be in this room, but I'm beating my kids over the ears with what I learn, and we speak to 10 and speak to 10, and
I think, this is why I do talks like this. What you just said is why I do talks like this. I don't get paid to do it. I do it because I believe that, in fact, it makes a difference. Occasionally I get paid to do it, but not in community centers, not in... and it's crucial. It's also extremely challenging. Again, behavioral change, we can argue ad nauseum about how to do it properly. Sometimes I think social media is a major obstacle to it in terms of disinformation, active disinformation. Those people have to talk, but they also have to influence social, because the genie's not going back into the bottle. So, creating a culture where that knowledge is shared in every way possible, I think is really crucial.